Grüezi. This is Global Pay Fest 25, JGA's journey around the world of payroll. I'm Lewis Roskilly, Associate at JGA Recruitment, and your host for this session. I'm delighted to continue our event with our focus on Switzerland. Switzerland, with its multi-language regions, canton-based tax system, and unique social security structure, presents distinct challenges that require specialised knowledge. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Orkideh Margagliotti, a Swiss payroll expert from RH.
Thank you, Louise. I'm honored to be here today to discuss the Swiss payroll with you. It's a great initiative put in place by your company. This is the first time event covering the global payroll. I'm very happy to be with you today and discover all the payroll people interests and all the payroll work in different countries.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today to share your expertise with our global audience. Could you please tell us a bit about yourself and your experience with Swiss payroll?
Sure. I started in 2005 with Swiss payroll in a trading company and gradually specialized in the EMEA region, where I personally processed more than 15 countries and supervised 22. At the same time, I followed university certifications in global mobility and HR to understand the compliance impacts on payrolls. As payroll involves both HR and accounting, it is vital to understand both. Therefore, to make sure I understand the full picture of payroll requirements, I have also completed some accounting trainings.
Wonderful. I know everyone else will be really looking forward to this session. Over the next hour, we'll be covering key Swiss payroll challenges, recent regulatory updates, and best practices for multinational organisations, a case study, and a Q&A. So, Orkideh, please, can you start by telling us all about Swiss payroll?
Sure, with pleasure. Thank you, Luis, and hello to everyone joining us for the Global Pay Festival 2025. I'm excited to share insight into Swiss payroll and help multinational organizations understand the unique aspects of processing payroll in Switzerland. Switzerland payroll system operates within a distinctive regulatory framework that differs significantly from many other countries. Switzerland operates as a federation of 26 cantons, each with significant autonomy regarding taxation and certain employment regulations. With, of course, 4 official languages, such as German, French, Italian, and Romansh, documentation and compliance requirements are very, very varied. Income taxes are also levied on a federal, cantonal, and communal levels, with rates varying significantly between the cantons. Switzerland has extensive mandatory social security scheme, including the old age, disability, occupational pension plans, which they are divided in 3 pillars. Switzerland has a particularity of not being a part of the EU community, but Switzerland negotiated an extensive bilateral agreements affecting cross-border workers and social security conditions. Employers must provide the accident insurances, occupational pension coverage, and ensure that the employees has the health insurance and they are complying with the mandatory obligations. Various immigration work permits also it's impacting the different employment and payroll implications. One of other most important challenges of the Swiss payroll is their cantonal-based taxation system. Switzerland's decentralized tax structure creates the significant complexity of the correct tax deductions in the payroll system. 26 different tax systems, which each can determine their own tax and regulations, are making really complex the payroll withholding taxes. Then, among the several allowances which are mandatory, such as the child allowance or other allowances which like maternity, etc., the differences can be seen between the cantons. Therefore, the different deductions, different allowances, and also different filings are required. Tax residency also is a very challenging part of the Swiss payroll, because the based of the center of life interest of the employee, the tax residency is determined. Therefore, this is also adding a complexity for the Swiss taxations. There is key compliance requirements for Switzerland. First of all, just like all countries, when an employee is joining the company, the most important is the registration with the cantonal tax authorities, with the cantonal social securities, and also making sure that employees has the correct work permits and authorization to work in the canton and with the company. Cross-canton and cross-country mobility also has a big implications on actual working system in Switzerland. As I've mentioned before, social security system retirement system in Switzerland is based on the 3 pillars. The first is the social security contributions, which is the old age and survivors insurance, disability insurance, and income compensation, along with the unemployment insurances. The second pillar is covering the occupational pension, which is mandatory, but still the employer has the autonomy to choose the scheme and the plan that they want to give to their employees. The overall percentage of the first pillar, which is the social security, the deductions are split between employer and employees equally. And the minimum requirement for the occupational pension plan, which is the second pillar, is also at least 50% of contribution by employer, but still employer can put a better plan in place or participate for more percentages and add and include certain additional coverages into this pension plan. Professional accident coverage is totally in charge of the employer. Employers can also contract the non-professional insurances, which they can take in charge, or they can also deduct it from the employees. Each industry, each work section and sector has their own specific premium rates. As mentioned before, this multi-language Swiss community is adding a difficulty and administrative burden on the employers, because they need to give to each cantonal authority the contracts and the communications in the regional languages. The employees with the different regional languages, they can require to receive the pay slips in their specific languages. This is creating much more challenges, and it requires a lot of compliance putting in place by the employer. Authorities are asking always to be communicated in the local languages. Statutory filing requirements should be in the local languages. Therefore, all the payroll specialists, they are generally speaking 2 or 3 of the national languages. Switzerland, being in the heart of the Europe, has a very unique position. We have a lot of cross-border employees coming from the neighboring countries, such as France, Germany, Italy, and Austria, and they are employed by the Swiss companies. Swiss has signed the bilateral taxation agreement with each of our neighbor countries. In this bilateral taxation agreements, there is regulated the special tax provisions, the special totalization agreements for the cross borders, and specific work required permits. Another difficulty and challenge of the Swiss payroll, and I think any payroll, is also the international assignments. International assignments is very important because coming from another country, working in Switzerland and being under another social security system is making the social security and taxes coordination and applications very complex. Switzerland has agreed and signed totalization agreements with 44 countries and tried to facilitate this burden of the social security by signing these totalization agreements. When an employee is coming to Switzerland, working from, let's say, from another country, working in Switzerland, but still remaining in the social security of the host company, there is a coverage system named A1 certificate or certificate of coverage, which is ensuring that the employee who is working in Switzerland is covered under the social security of the home country. This is all adding complexity to the payroll and the payroll reporting, such as the posted worker notifications, shadow payrolls, etc. Another specificity which Switzerland can have, and many other European countries, is the 13-month salary. 13-month salary in Switzerland is not mandatory, but it's a very common practice across a lot of sectors. This is usually paid in December, or it can be splitted between June and December. Depends how the employer is deciding to do. The 13-month salary is subject to the normal social security and all the taxations. There is different bonus systems, which none of them is mandatory. But it could be regulated by the employment law, meaning if the employer is giving every year the same amount of the bonus to the employees, and it's not precising each time to the employees that this is a gratification bonus, this bonus could become a specific requirement and it should be paid every year. This is something that employers need to pay attention. There is a lot of social insurance contribution calculations, different calculations, which needs to be which the employers need to make sure that they are correctly splitting the different components of salaries and making sure that each salary component has the correct social security contributions. What can I say else, Luis? Yeah, I think that overall, the Swiss pension and retirement system with the 3 pillars is counted among one of the best European retirement plans, and it's covering to allow the employees to have a comfortable retirement. I don't know if I've covered. I think I've covered a lot of these subjects.
So that's seen some really good insights there so far. But what I would also like to ask is, what would you recommend some best practices for multinational organizations?
Sure. Based on my experience working with international companies, some of the best practices for managing Swiss payroll effectively is implement canton-specific tax configurations that account for varying tax rates and regulation across all 26 cantons. Develop comprehensive social security registration protocols to ensure timely and accurate enrollment in all mandatory schemes. It's important to establish multi-language documentation standards appropriate to each language region. The companies need to create robust cross-border worker policies addressing taxation, social security, and work permit requirements. Implementing detailed compensation structure that clearly defines base salary, 13-month salary payments, and variable components. Leverage Swiss-Tech certified payroll systems capable of handling Swiss-specific calculations and electronic submissions. Create payroll calendars accounting for cantonal holiday and filing deadlines in order to not miss the filing deadlines. Then I think that's globally the overall best practices could be this, which I can think of. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the multi-canton tax structure combined with the extensive social security system and cross-border complexities makes Swiss payroll particularly unique for multinational organizations. And that's before you even start on the different languages. So now I reckon we should take a look at a case study and see how we could handle a complex Swiss payroll in real life. So I'm going to share my screen. And yeah, take it away.
Okay, then company is a Velotech Solutions. Velotech expanded into Zurich with a mixed workforce of Swiss and EU nationals. Local cantonal variations and insurance compliance were key hurdles. Okay, payroll challenges. Let's see. Cantonal tax source deduction errors. Okay. I think the employer must ask the employees to provide a tax residency certificate at the start of the employment. In this certificate, the tax scale which should be applied to each employee is mentioned. In the absence of this certificate, the work permit, employees' marital status, children in charge are all the factors which would define the correct tax rate and scale based on each cantonal rules. Therefore, an accurate data collection is very important upon hiring of an employee. I think that Velotech should implement an integrated HRIS system which can connect the HR and the payroll system and is the best solution to avoid the misinformation and ensure the data accuracy. The second challenge is employees residing in different cantons were taxed using Zurich rates, leading to the tax discrepancies. This is a very common issue. The employer must ask the employees to provide a tax residency. I insist on that tax residency certificate at the start of the employment. If any errors occur in the document, in the deduction of the employee's taxes and applying the correct cantonal rates, the employer should immediately inform the employers and employees' cantonal tax offices and complete the disclosure to request for correction of the withholding taxes to avoid any double taxation for the employee and ensure the allocation of the correct cantonal taxes and on-time payments. The penalties could be given in the event of errors. Incorrect calculation of withholding tax can have serious consequences for both the employer and employees. Penalties should occur for the employers. Failure to meet payment deadlines or miscalculations of amount due may result in financial penalties. Fines or refunds may be imposed in the event of fraud or deliberate non-compliance with the tax obligations. Risk to employees that any employee who fails to report a change in circumstances or fails to apply for an adjustment within the time limit may be subject to a substantial retroactive adjustment and interest on arrears. Therefore, it is very, very important informing immediately the cantonal tax offices. Misclassification of commuting expenses. Then reimbursement of expenses is always a very difficult subject. Important thing is to establish clear policies. It is important to differentiate commuting from business travel. Define what constitutes a business trip versus a commute to and from work. Set reimbursement guidelines. Clearly outline what expenses are eligible for reimbursement and how they should be documented. Communicated policies effectively. Ensure all employees are aware of the policy and understand the distinction between commuting and the business travel. This is very important. Automation of expenses tracking. A software can also help to track and classify the expenses. And potentially, it could flag also the misclassifications. This is very important. If there is a possibility that employer automates this expense tracking, it is really a very helpful and compliant procedure. Separate personal and business expenses. Sometimes the companies are dedicating specific business credit cards to minimize the errors and keep the track of deductible versus non-deductible spendings. Because when the employees are using their own credit cards, it's very difficult to look at the bills, the invoices, and look and to track each expenses which are eligible. And most important, and not the last but not the least, is proactive audits. Employers need to conduct regular audits to maintain vigilance and prevent the fraud. The next question is, Transport reimbursements exceeded allowable tax-free thresholds, but were not reported as income. Swiss employers often follow guidelines set by the Federal Tax Administration regarding tax-deductible business expenses. This includes per diems for employees traveling for work. In 2025, these rates can vary based on the location and duration of the travel. Employers must ensure that per diems do not exceed the standard tax-free daily allowances, which differ by canton and depends on whether the travel is domestic or international. Employees should also be aware that the FTA requires detailed documentation, including the justification of the per diem amounts and the specific purpose of travel. If the allowances exceed the set limits or lack appropriate documentation, the excess amount might be taxable. The salaries of the employees who are over-reimbursed should be corrected, and the corrected declaration and wage certificate should be submitted to the tax authorities. Expense reimbursement can be structured using two primary methods: effective or flat rate. Each method has the advantages and the inconveniences. And the choice depends on the nature of the business and its specific needs. Effective expenses reimbursement is suitable for all employees with a valid employment contract. On the other hand, the flat rate reimbursement is usually used to employees in a managerial or senior role and or field employees, those who frequently travel for work. In the case to avoid any over reimbursement and to reduce the administrative burden, Velotech can implement the flat rate reimbursement policy, which at least 10 beneficiaries of the flat rate expense reimbursement model is needed. A company should have their flat rate expense regulations approved by the cantonal authorities. This is highly recommended to avoid potential complications later. The next challenge of Velotech is AHV and LPP misalignment. In the Swiss pension system, the AHV or AVS, which is the old age and survivors insurance, and LPP, which is the occupational pensions, are designed to work together to provide retirement income. However, there can be a misalignment between the two due to factors like varying contribution rates and benefit levels. Contribution rates for AVS and LPP can vary, leading to different levels of coverage. How to address these misalignments is that an employer can choose a pension fund and offer benefits beyond the legal minimum requirements, providing additional coverage and addressing some of the misalignments. Individuals can contribute also to the private pension plans to supplement their AVS and LPP benefits. The next challenge is contributions to Social Security and pension funds were incorrectly split across income types. The Pillar 1, which was the AVS, old age, survivals, disability, and income compensation, has a contribution rate of 10.6% on a gross salary, split it equally between employee and employer. Unemployment insurance is overall 2.2% of contribution split between employer and the employee up to a certain cap of 148,200 Swiss francs annually. Some components of the salary, such as child allowance, are not included in Social Security calculation basis. The employers must make sure that these contributions are correctly processed on each salary component. Pension contributions, which is the occupational pension, the mandatory one, and the second pillar, are calculated based on the insured salary. The insured salary is not only capped at the lower end, but also at the upper end. The maximum mandatory insured gross salary in 2025 is 90,720 Swiss francs annual. Employers can choose a better pension scheme for their employees to make sure the higher portion of salaries are insured, including additional death and disability coverage. To be able to correctly process these contributions and deductions, the payroll team needs to understand the pension scheme contracted by the company and clearly understand the pensionable salary. Implementation of the monthly or quarterly checks and reconciliation based on the quarterly or monthly pension invoices will avoid the discrepancy of the pension contributions. The Social Security and pension contributions are a liability of an employer. Therefore, adaptation of the best practices, such as implementation of the SOX controls, monthly and quarterly reconciliations, and the additional control and approval layers will avoid miscalculation. 13th month salary proration mistakes. The best thing is to implement a payroll software because many payroll software programs can automate these calculations, making it easier to ensure accuracy. In addition, a second and sometimes the third layer of a control should be implemented in the company for validation of all the salary components. A payroll manager should check all the payroll elements, and a special approving process should be implemented in the company for all the components of the salary elements. This will avoid any miscalculations.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you, Orkideh. That was an excellent walkthrough of Velotex challenges. I think you outlined clearly what could potentially have happened and how to provide a solution. We are almost at the end of our hour on Swiss Payroll, but we do have time for a quick Q&A. And since we broke the news about Global Pay Fest, we've received several questions from payroll professionals about managing Swiss payroll. So let's address some of those common questions now. So the first question we have is, how should companies prepare for and adapt to the latest Swiss DEC standards?
Okay. Company must evaluate current policies, procedures, and systems against the latest Swiss DEC standards. This includes reviewing reporting processes, data collection, and internal controls related to social and private insurance, taxes, and statistics. Develop and implement internal controls to ensure compliance with the new standards, including data accuracy, completeness, and time reporting. Update payroll and reporting systems. Provide adequate training to payroll specialists on the new standards, their responsibilities and reporting procedures, and of course, seek the expert advice on the legal requirements.
So then what are the best practices for managing cross-border workers in Swiss payroll?
The cross-border employment landscape requires careful attention to regulatory requirements, particularly when navigating Swiss labor law alongside international obligations. Organizations must maintain comprehensive record of working hours, carefully manage leave entitlements, and ensure adequate health insurance coverages, while complying with workplace safety regulations. Another cornerstone of effective management is regular compliance reviews. Organizations need to keep pace with continuous change of international agreements and regulations. This involves monitoring legislative changes and their impact on cross-border worker classifications. Successful companies integrate these reviews into their regular operations. This ensures that systems and processes evolve with regulatory requirements.
And how should companies manage payroll across multiple cantons?
Based on my experience, streamlined operations is the key factor. A centralized system allows for the consolidation of a payroll processing across different cantons, ensuring consistency and efficiency. Centralized system can integrate with HR and accounting software for seamless data transfer and reduced manual errors.
And then what are the key considerations for properly calculating and managing occupational pension benefits?
In Switzerland, accurately calculating and managing occupational pension benefits within payroll requires careful attention to several key aspects, determining the insured salary, calculating contributions, both employee and employer, and understanding the legal framework. Of course, complying with reporting requirements is very important.
And I know you've touched on this a few times, and it's a common question, but how should companies handle 13-month salary payments?
As mentioned before, despite not being legally required, it is a very common practice, particularly in sectors where CBAs are prevalent. If the contract specifies a 13-month salary, it is usually calculated based on the employee's annual salary, with some proration for those who start later than the start of the current year. The 13th month salary is subject to the same deductions and taxes as regular salary.
Brilliant. And what are the compliance requirements around managing foreign nationals in Swiss payroll?
Managing foreign nationals in Swiss payroll requires employers to comply with various regulations, such as immigrations related to work permit, social security, and tax withholdings. Specifically, employers must ensure employees have the necessary work permits to work in the country and also register with the relevant social insurance funds, such as health insurances, and also make sure that the withhold taxes from certain employees based on their residency statutes is compliant with the cantonal requirements.
And I know you've had experience in this before. So what are the key considerations when setting up a payroll function for the first time in Switzerland?
Wow, that's a very difficult task, but very interesting. Setting up a payroll function in Switzerland for the first time requires careful planning and attention to detail, especially regarding Swiss labor laws, tax obligation, and social security contributions. Key areas to focus on includes choosing an adequate payroll system, establishing clear payroll policies, collecting necessary employee data, understanding and complying with Swiss tax and social security regulations, and ensuring accurate and timely payment processes are in place.
Thank you. I mean, these insights are incredibly valuable for organisations managing Swiss payroll or potentially setting up that new function. Maybe looking a little bit in the future, what trends do you see emerging in Swiss payroll over the next few years?
Talking with different companies and also the payroll specialists, I've noticed that there is a demand of increased automation, more sophisticated software solutions, and faster payroll processing. Changes in work dynamics and employee expectations to work from home or on a hybrid model. Swiss payroll will be marked by a focus on balancing wage growth and inflation, leveraging technology for automation and data security, and adapting to changing work dynamics and employee expectations. This is the future of the Swiss payroll.
There we go.
In my opinion.
Thank you. Well, I mean, you've certainly shown there is a huge complexity of the Swiss payroll, and it certainly requires that specialised knowledge and careful attention to both the federal frameworks and cantonal variations. So we're now at the end of our Switzerland session. Although this is one I feel could go on forever, I want to express my sincere thank you to Orkideh for taking your time and sharing your expertise, knowledge, and insights. This is certainly one of the more distinctive systems globally for multinational organizations to navigate. To our audience, thank you for joining us for this important stop on our 24-hour journey around the world of global payroll. You should now be well equipped to take on your organization's Swiss payroll operations when expanding into the Swiss market. If you'd like to revisit the session, all sessions from the Global PayFest 25 will be available on demand after the event. Coming up next is our session on Polish payroll, another tricky system with a very complex social security rules. Orkideh, thank you once again for your time and expertise. Do you have any final words for our audience before we close?
Thank you, Louis, for this opportunity. It was a great experience. I would recommend all employers to seek professional advice when managing payroll in any country, as the accuracy of a payroll is one of the key factors in keeping employees happy. I can't wait to watch other global expert intervention on your global payroll event. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. And that's time up. I'm Louis Roskilly. It's been an absolute pleasure being a part of the Global Pay Fest. Stay online as we are heading to Poland with Abu Chowdhury and Karolina Sternberg.